So we're going to jump back into the evidence of Richard Morgan KC to the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, and he admits at one stage during the trial of Lee Castleton that he aggressively accused the sub-postmaster of making figures up. One of the most interesting points of these things is this is based on the accounts that were produced from Horizon. And several times, on at least 4 occasions that he's taken to in his witness statements to the Post Office inquiry, he implies that actually it would be very hard to prove that Horizon was actually working. And I think one of the most shocking things he says, Horizon saying there is a loss was not proof that a loss had actually occurred, which was certainly relied upon in so many cases. So he felt they needed to change strategy, because if they relied on Horizon, they couldn't even prove that a loss had occurred, never mind who had taken it. Let's jump into the inquiry.
If we go further on to paragraph 27, you say in the second line, I recall there was a line of authorities in relation to accounts stated and settled accounts. When I researched that line of authorities, I realised there was authority for the argument that if Mr. Castleton was tendering his own figures to Poll, he was to the Post Office, he was vouching their accuracy. I therefore advise we should realign our pleaded case to take this point, and we should try to establish the true trading position by reference to Mr. Castleton's own documents, by which I mean documents produced and or verified by Mr. Castleton, rather than printouts from Horizon. What if the printouts from Horizon were the documents verified by Mr. Castleton?
Well, then he was verifying their truth or accuracy as at that particular date.
What if he was saying at the same time as verifying them, these are not accurate, but I have got to verify them, otherwise I can't continue trading into the next trading period?
Well,
Exactly, this was the whole point. It's the whole point with the balancing issues. They couldn't open the post office the day after if the accounts didn't balance. I mean, that's a flaw in the post office process and the Horizon system by not allowing that. They might have had a good reason initially, but in practice, it doesn't actually work to do that. So let's just take this. You've got a post office, you've got a sub-postmaster. You are telling them they've got to pay back money which doesn't exist. But let's even put that to one side for a moment. You tell them they've got to pay back money. Well, to pay back money, they've got to earn money. To earn money, they've got to open up. To open up, the accounts have to balance. One way or another, they have to balance. What do you do if somebody's asking you for £2, £3, £4, £5, £6, £7, £8, £9, £10,000 that you don't have? Well, you just go bankrupt, don't you? Because you're at an impasse. If you don't sign off the documents, you can't open up. And if you don't have the money to put in, where's it going to come from? Because the whole premise is, well, the sub-postmaster would have the money because they must have taken it or misaccounted for it. But when the money doesn't exist, they've not got that money to hand. Because who has that kind of money to hand? So you've really put them in between a rock and a hard place, haven't you? You need to earn some more money to pay us back something that we say you owe us, but you can't open up without signing off these documents. But actually the documents are inaccurate because they're produced by Horizon. What a farcical situation to put them in.
You're asking me a hypothetical question.
Do you not recall the evidence about the many calls he made to the helpline?
I do recall those. I also recall his evidence that each and every one of his records of transactions at the end of the week were accurate.
In that they recorded discrepancies and shortfalls?
In that they recorded the actual figures for the branch for that particular week.
And
I'm not so sure actually that he does agree with that. Actually, I'm not so sure there's any sub-postmaster which I've heard from which actually agrees with that. The system's broke. He wasn't ringing up the helpline for giggles and laughs, was he? He was ringing it up because he was having problems with it.
He was simultaneously phoning into the helpline and saying that the figures shown on these trading statements aren't the products of transactions conducted by me.
His evidence at trial was that he had checked all the figures and they were true and accurate. And I put to him quite aggressively at one point that in fact he was making up the figures, for instance, for cash that he had received. And he maintained his position throughout, as he was perfectly entitled to do, that his accounts were true and accurate. Now,
so there you go. So what he's saying is the actual cash I've taken, I've put in, it might not balance with this nonsense that Horizon's coming out. So what's true and accurate is the figures that I'm telling you I've put into the system, it doesn't mean what Horizon's spitting out as a report is true and accurate. It means what he's saying is, if I say I took £20 and put it in the till, I put that into Horizon, that was accurate.
Of course, because of the way the case was pleaded, if his accounts were not true and accurate, then the entire matter would have gone off for a formal account to find out what the actual trading position had been throughout that period. But that turned out not to be necessary because his sworn evidence at trial was that the accounts were true and accurate.
Over the page, please, to paragraph 29, and scroll down a little bit, the last 4 or 5 lines, you say, instead, I needed physical records of cash and stock in, cash and stock out, and a calculation at the end of the day of what should be left after it had all been taken into account. If that was done, then it seemed to me that the operation of the Horizon system was irrelevant. That essentially developed into your principal case strategy, is that right?
Yes.
But the documents are surely being produced by Horizon, as we've already established.
I want to look at the reasons why you developed that case strategy. Can we go back, please, to page 6 and the opening paragraph at the opening part of paragraph 22? You say, it seemed obvious to me that trying to prove forensically that an entire computer network operated properly was going to be a very difficult, if not impossible, exercise. And it also seemed that Mr. Castleton had not identified any mechanism by which errors were allegedly being generated.
He's a sub-postmaster, not a technical expert. It's normal for a user to identify the symptoms or what's happening, not the cause or what's wrong with the computer system. That's why you have technical experts for these kind of things. They take reports of errors from users and investigate them.
And then if we can look also at page 9, at paragraph 29, about halfway through, about 7 or 8 lines in, you say, trying to recreate an entire hardware and software system to replicate what was in place at the time of the relevant event would probably be extremely difficult, if not impossible. I didn't see how I could prove that there were actual losses by reference simply to what a computer printout said.
So that there blows a hole in pretty much all the Horizon cases. I mean, this one he's claiming wasn't based on Horizon, although that would be up for debate, but clearly their statements like that blow a hole on anything which relies solely on Horizon evidence proving an actual loss without any other concurrent evidence to back that up.
And then page 10, please, paragraph 33, about 8 lines in, I thought that even if the network could be reconstituted, I could not prove that it was impervious to external modifications, by which I mean hacking, unauthorized alteration, etc. I was generally concerned that if I was going to have to prove the case by reference to Horizon logs, I wanted to know whether there were possible ways that the system could be manipulated, and I wanted to understand whether there was a context in which any other, and if so, how many incidents had been reported. I don't recall ever being told that there were any incidents or weaknesses, and the issue seemed to fall away. And then lastly on this topic, page 13, please, paragraph 43, I thought it was difficult to prove a loss only by reference to the Horizon IT system, because in oral argument at trial, I'd be able to do no more than point to a computer printout and say that the printout showed that there was a loss. To my mind, that didn't prove a loss. It only proved what the sum of the figures produced by a machine showed when a calculation was undertaken and what figure was produced as a result of that calculation. I referred you to 4 extracts from your witness statement saying in roughly the same thing but amplifying in places the reasons. When you gave that advice to the post office, did anyone say, no, hold on, this is easy, we have people with expertise, either in our organisation or in Fujitsu, who can prove the integrity of the Horizon system and the data that it produces?
May I unbundle the question slightly? I'm not sure that I ever gave advice in strident terms that I couldn't prove it in that way. I think the advice that I gave is that there was a nice clean-cut way through to the proof of the loss by going by way of account stated or an agent's running account. I think that a lot of what I've said there is my own internal thought process about how difficult it was going to be to prove the case if all I had was a piece of paper produced by a computer. Yes, there are provisions within the Civil Evidence Act that would have enabled me to rely on it, but it wasn't a very satisfactory way to go about formal proof of a loss. Sorry,
If we just go back to paragraph 33 on page 10, please.
Sorry, can I just write something down, because I'd like to go back on something.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, paragraph 33 on page 10, yes.
At the second half of the paragraph, where you say, I thought that even if the network could be reconstituted, I couldn't prove it was impervious, etc.
Yes.
You give essentially 3 questions that ought to arise, would this be right, if you're seeking to prove in legal proceedings a loss based on data produced by a computer. There may be external modifications made to the system may have been manipulated, and what about other incidents that have occurred and may have been reported?
Basically, yes.